Welcome back to the most exhausting Valheim challenge. In this video, I begin my journey into the swamp and more. Will I defeat Bone Mass, or will I get lost along the way? In the last episode, I encountered my first Vesquito, and it sent me all the way back to my spawn island. So, first thing I need to do to get this episode started off is go find my body and get it back. To begin this, I respawned with nothing naturally, so I had to refarm everything in order to get back my finewood bow so I could kill the Deathsquito when I got there and to get a carve. So I spent the early stages of this play session just farming basic resources that I've already farmed before. I basically had to play through the Black Forest in a speedrun. I did eventually make the carve, and I decided that since I'm going to be grabbing my gear anyway, I didn't need to take anything more than the leather armor I had in my chest. So I began sailing, and about 9 minutes into this sail, I found this river shortcut, which I thought was a shortcut. And by the way, at this point, I know where my body's at because I watched back the video from last time. So I know where I'm going, and I know where I messed up on the world tree. I actually went to the other branch. There's two that kind of have an offshoot, and I decided to go to the other one thinking it was my actual branch. So I knew where I was headed, and I was using the world tree as a guide. And again, about 9 minutes into this sail, I found a river that I thought would have been a shortcut to where I died. So I took the shortcut, and I ended up in this super narrow mountains biome with no room to maneuver my boat, and this was probably a warning sign for what was going to happen later. Thankfully, this did allow me to make it through, and I was able to get through, and it actually ended up being a shortcut. But taking these little shortcuts and paths with a boat is something that I need to get better about not doing, and actually comes to really hurt me later on in this episode. So after I somehow made it through that super tight mountain pass, I actually recognized where I was at. I saw in Troll Island, the island with just a troll cave on it, that I had gone through before in the last video on the way to my death. So now that I knew where I was at, I was able to quickly identify where I had landed before. I saw the loot on the ground from the Grey Dwarves I had killed, and I was able to park my boat and run up and find my body. When I got there, I didn't see the Deathsquito that killed me, but I was really careful to make sure that I was alert at all times, because if I had died again, that would have been a complete tragedy. So I ran up, I got to my body, and I realized that the inventory was actually completely full, and I wasn't able to take everything in one go. So I actually had to run back into the Black Forest where it was safe, dump my inventory, run back to my body, and get it in 2 trips. Which thankfully worked out, even though I had to expose myself in the plains for twice as long. I was able to get my stuff, and I was able to get back on the boat and start sailing home. And since I knew or at least I thought I knew where I was at this point, I decided to not take the shortcut home because I thought that was sketchy, so I decided to take a new route. And in the effect of doing this, I actually got lost and followed the exact same tree branch that I followed the first time, and went to the same offshoot that I thought was my base last time and got me killed. But this time I actually made it to the offshoot and where I was confident my base was, and instead of my base there was a swamp. At this point I knew this wasn't where my base was at, and I was super confused, so I am watching back my footage that I had of where is my base, what am I doing, I don't know where I'm at. I was pretty confident at this point that my base just had to be on the other side of the swamp, because I was like, where else could my base be? And that's when I came across the Bog Witch, and I know that the Bog Witch is not able to spawn on your spawn island, and so I knew I was completely lost at this point. So unfortunately, at this stage, I didn't really know where to go, so I was just kind of sailing aimlessly. And the nighttime sailing, when it gets dark out and the fog rolls in, that I had to deal with, made this even worse. I eventually just got to the point where I just parked off the coast where the waves weren't so bad and just waited for the daylight, because you really cannot see. And this became a huge grievance of mine for later in the series when I end up boating more, is you're kind of just at a standstill. And I mentioned this in the first video, when it's nighttime and there's fog, you're kind of just waiting, because if you try and boat, there's a not zero chance that you'll end up running into an island and crashing into, hopefully not the plains, but you know, it could be an upper tier biome and just getting yourself killed. So you kind of just have to wait. And kind of as I alluded to earlier, as I was boating around aimlessly, I found a river that I thought would have been a shortcut between two plains to get me to the other side and hopefully turned around faster. And I don't know why I thought this was a good idea. Obviously, between two plains biomes, there's a high chance that if I do get stuck, I'm gonna die. I mean, if I have to step foot in the plains biome at this time, I can't survive a Desquito hit, I couldn't survive a Fulling hit, I couldn't survive a Lox hit, everything kills me, I don't have enough food, I don't know where I'm at. It would have ended up horribly, but I still decided to go down this, and unfortunately this time, it was blocked off by a mountain biome. So, knowing that there's no chance I'd survive a plains, I decided to take the risk, jump through the mountain without a frost resistance mead, and see where it led. So I abandoned my boat, and I actually had to take a healing mead in order to just survive the frost damage from the mountain, because I didn't have a frost potion at this point, because I had just beaten the Elder. So I have not gotten to the stage where I'm ready to be in the mountains. I'm not even ready to be in the swamp, really, at this stage. But by some miracle, I managed to make it through the mountain, and lo and behold, it was into a plains. But thankfully this time I got my revenge on the Desquito, and I actually managed to hit my arrow and didn't end up back at my spawn. Although this only led me into crash landing into a swamp biome, which this was actually the first time I had been into a swamp and crossed the barrier, and I was not prepared to be in this swamp. I did not do enough damage, I couldn't take enough damage, I didn't know where I was at, and this was all around a bad situation for me to be in. I was pretty much just running around, trying to think of something to do. The running theory at this point was, if I can find a black forest, I can just refarm everything I need to make a raft or a carve. But unfortunately, you need a fine wood tree, or you need to get boar to make a raft or a carve. And you either need to get the meadows biome or dip into the plains for the fine wood. And this far out, I didn't think there was any chance I'd run into a meadows, and so I was really just racking my brain for what to do here, and I was completely lost. I mean, this was not a good thing. I somehow managed to grab my body that I lost last time, and get myself more lost in a worse position, and more confused, and kind of even more screwed, because now I didn't have a boat to get me out of here. So, unfortunately, this led to me running through swamp, gathering a large amount of Draugr following me, and in an effort to evade them, I tried to jump into a shack that I thought would, you know, break their pathing. I did not see a wraith that was camping this, and I thought wraiths could not spawn during the day, but it appears they can spawn in these little, like, abandoned shacks. So I go in the corner to heal, and a wraith comes flying in and ends me. After that last death that I just took, I kind of felt a little depressed, but I knew I needed to get my stuff back, so this time I went a little bit more methodically. I actually farmed back Trollhide. I went to the island across from mine, where there's a bigger black forest, killed some trolls, worked up, got Trollhide, got a tier 4 fine wood bow, got everything so that I wouldn't actually, the only thing I needed for my body essentially would have been the crypt key. And then I boated back, and keep in mind, when I say I boated back, I kind of glance over it. It's 10 minutes of my life every single time I boat there or boat back, and that's with good wind, and that's, I mean, it's kind of a thing with no map, but that is certainly a factor, and I'm just going to kind of glance over it, but it's a large part. In fact, the majority of my playthrough probably has been spent on the ocean, which kind of is more thematic for a Viking, but nonetheless, I just wanted to bring that up. So I made it back to the swamp, same spot, used the tree again to get back there. I went into the swamp, and I watched back the footage to see where I died exactly. I ran in, I actually managed to get my body, and I ran back to my boat, but there was too many enemies surrounding it, and an abomination had just spawned, so I wasn't able to safely get on the boat and get out, so I needed to kite the enemies away, get far enough away, and then run back. Unfortunately, during this time, I got hit by a leech, and the poison damage takes for 30 in hardcore, and so I just watched my light fade out. So now this is the second time that I died in this exact same swamp, and the third time since I killed the Elder that I died away from base and had to completely restart. After this, there was a quick, I say quick, for me it was probably 40 minutes, but there was a making of another carve. I didn't get gear because I just wanted to go get my crap and come back. It didn't work out like that, obviously. I should have taken the time to get the gear. But when I got there, I don't know why I didn't make gear. It's a miracle I actually managed to get my body. But the same abomination that had prevented my escape the first time also prevented my escape the second time. And there's this amazing clip that I'm about to play of it, I guess, giving me a hug and I didn't die. Either way, I somehow managed to kite it away, get back to my boat, and the plan that I had the first time, I managed to actually enact it and get out. Now, what do I do instead of, boating back to base? I think, well, I need to progress the swamp anyway, so while I'm here, when in Rome kind of thing, I may as well loot a swamp crypt. So I go to the Bog Witch, because I know she's kind of like a checkpoint, she's safe. While I'm there, I purchase some squirrel tail to make the Ratosk meat, and then a serving tray for later in the game. And then I decided to explore a nearby crypt. Unfortunately, the entrance to this crypt was bad, and I had to back out immediately, and so I tried the other crypt. This one actually allowed me to enter. I was able to kind of work my way through it a little bit, but unfortunately, inside of this one, there was a 2-star Draugr, and at this time, I didn't know you could use the Stag Breaker to hit around the walls to clear the crypt safely. So I was clearing a side of the, the iron, and then shooting through it. Well, the 2-star Draugr could also shoot me through it, so I took yet another death. And at this point, I had rage quit for the day, so this was just a brutal reminder of how hard, very hard mode actually can be. And then, finally, I had a successful run, so I made a carve for what now seems to be the 10th time. I safely got my body that was in the crypt. I proceeded to loot this crypt further. I managed to get iron back to my boat. I got it on safely, and I went back home. And on my way back home, I actually saw a giant turtle, so I was able to get some of this shit in. I haven't done anything with it yet, but I guess I have it now. It was kind of cool to see because I know they're pretty rare. And then something I want to mention is, like I said, when I'm boating, I kind of glance over it, but it is literally 10 minutes of my life. It really feels like commuting to work at this point, especially with this specific swamp in my base. I mean, I've now boated to this swamp 5 times and then the back once, so it's a route that actually feels like a route, and I drive buses for work, so it's weird having that feeling for a game. And another YouTuber that did this series, Jack, also had that same statement, and I kind of get it now. It is just really weird, but finally, after I think it was 20 in-game days, I made it back home. And I had some iron from looting the crypt and was able to put that in the smelter and actually start the Iron Age. Along with this, I got back to my base. I hadn't been here in a while, so I had a lot of base chores to do. I started brewing a frost resistance mead because my goal at this point was, if I'm going to get one shot in the swamp anyway, I may as well go to the mountains and get higher tier weapons and armor, i.e. Fenris set, and then go back to the swamp and make it easier on myself. Because if I'm one shot either biome, what's the difference? That was the logic with the frost resistance mead, and I would need it later. And then I finally put the Elder's Head back at the spawn altar, and now have 2 bosses officially taken care of. So again, as I mentioned, it's been a while since I've been at base. There's a lot of chores for me to do, a lot of crops for me to plant, a lot of things for me to just smelt and work around, but I had the crops planted and then I had my stuff smelting, and so while that was going on in the background, I decided to sail for a closer swamp because I couldn't make a 10-minute sail every time I needed to get iron. Plus that one was far enough out where the only thing around to fall back into would have been plains, and that's certain death. So I did end up finding a nearby swamp, or nearer, and then I decided to, land in this swamp and check out the crypt. So this is when I actually learned how to use the Stag Breaker technique, and this made clearing the dungeons very easy. In fact, there's not really anything to talk about. You just mine close enough to where they can't hit you, but you can hit through the wall, and then you spam the Stag Breaker, everything dies, and then you can clean up anything left with a bow. So it's a pretty safe way to clear these crypts in all honesty, and the most dangerous part is just running back to my boat with the iron, which again, I just get my rested buff at the entrance and make sure it's not nighttime, and that's really not that bad either. So at this point I was, kind of getting it figured out a little bit more. And so Also, in this first dungeon, I was able to find the bone mass vestige. So when you're in a dungeon, and I mentioned this in my first video, the vestige doesn't it orients you towards the boss, but the dungeon orientation is kind of strange. It's not the one-to-one with the overworld. So you have to use like a building piece, and I messed this up and the elder, and I messed it up here. And so I wasn't really, I got a hint at where Bomos is at, but it wasn't very helpful to me. And in fact, it kind of led me astray to begin with until I figured out how they really worked and how to actually use the, you know, dragon head technique, which I'll talk about later. But I was able to make it out of the swamp, and this is my first successful trip to the swamp. I didn't mention it, but I did find iron in the dungeon, and on top of that, I found a bonus vestige and 35 iron. So this is enough to start the Iron Age in full. On my way back, I had my first serpent attack. Or first one I actually successfully defended and didn't just cower to the nearest land mass. So in hardcore, with no map and no portals, when you're boating for as much as, you know, I do and you have to when you play this game mode, you kind of come across a lot of serpents. So you can use serpent meat as a normal food source, which is strange, but it's almost more common to have that than some other crops, even in double loot. So that is, I guess, a perk of being no map, no portals. This serpent attack, since I'm in a carve, it did damage my boat, and I had to panic crash into the nearby black forest and then wait for day, and this got me completely disoriented. And I kind of didn't know where I was at. I knew how to use the world tree, but I didn't really know where I was at. And then I came across this bare island, which, like I mentioned before, when I'm boating, it's kind of like routes. This was one of the turns on my route from the bogwood swamp. So I managed to actually find my way back home because I know what this exact island with this bear on it, where it was in relation to my base, which is just, again, it's just weird. It's not something you think about when you're just playing the video game. It's just a strange phenomenon. So I made it back to base with this iron, and again, I was gone probably for a couple in-game days, so I had to redo the crops, I had to resmelt the iron, I had to repair all my gear, and it's just all the little chores around base you don't really think about, and, you know, switch out the fermenter. And then once my iron was done smelting, I was able to make my first iron weapon. Which, the first weapon I choose to make, and actually only iron weapon, is the Huntsman's Bow. And the Huntsman's Bow is actually special because it has a hidden perk where it has a silent feature. So when you shoot something, it doesn't automatically alert the nearby enemies that something has been shot. So for that reason, this is actually a better bow than the Mountain's Draugr, for example. Because even though it may do less damage, at tier 4 it's about the same as a tier 1 Draugr, and yet you still have this perk where you can kind of pick enemies off without them knowing where you're at. And it, for now, pairs well with my Troll Hide, because Troll Hide makes me sneaky, but I do plan to switch that out eventually. I also, during this time, made poison resistance meads, and I would need this for the bonus fight, and just being in the swamp in general. I have now taken 2 deaths because of the poison in the swamp, so it's just something that if I'm going to be in the swamp for an extended period of time, I need to have some form of poison resist. So that's a good thing to make, and it's something that is a necessity in hardcore. And then I also managed, with leftover iron, I managed to make a stonecutter, so I was able to work on my base. And I'd been waiting to upgrade my base until I got the stonecutter, because I don't really like to make a temporary base and put a lot of time into it when I know I'm going to destroy it when I get a better resource. And stone is the next highest resource up until, really, for me, the Mistlands of building, and kind of even the Ashlands, where it makes the ability to build feel a lot more clean. So this is when I decided to start putting up a dock or a harbor for my boat. So the general idea for this is I wanted to have a safe little harbor where the boat could dock, and then around it I wanted to have a bunch of functional areas. So I wanted to have a large area with carts and stuff where I could unload the boat, and then I wanted to have a storage room that I'd make to the left, and then I wanted it to be well defended where there's walls around the whole thing. And this would be the entrance to my base. When I fully build it out later, I'd have a Viking village, and this would kind of be the entrance to the walls. This is how you get in and out of the base. So that's the goal here. That's the intention. And I am trying to get better at building, and I think I've had worse builds, I'll put it that way. My starter base, for example, doesn't look nearly as well as good as I would argue this one looks. And then once I got bored of building, I wanted to go explore and try and find Bone Mass Malter, which I was going off of the first vestige that I found, which at the time I didn't know how they really worked in dungeons, so it led me astray a little bit. So I kind of spent a lot of time circling around the edge of swamps hoping to find the Bone Mass Altar and not finding anything. And in fact, it ended up becoming about 5-6 in-game days, and none of this I was sleeping naturally because I can't sleep outside my base. So that's about, you know, 2-3 hours of my life that I'm just boating around and finding nothing. But eventually I did decide to land in a nearby swamp to get more iron for my huntsman's bow and hopefully find another vestige to give me more clues as to Bone Mass. In the swamp when I landed, again I had a welcome party of leeches, which is something that has kind of been a common occurrence, as they like to crowd around wherever you park your boat. But thankfully this time I was smart enough to bring poison resistance meads, so even if they hit me I would have been fine. And then, you know, I entered the crypt in this swamp and I did find another vestige. So this one, I still at this time didn't fully understand what I was doing, and I didn't know where it was pointing me, but I was able to get it, and now I know where it's at, so when if I needed to go back later to check, I could. And then I also got a good amount of iron from this crypt. I mean, it took 3 trips to the boat, maybe 4. I ended up with 72 iron. So in the end, this was a pretty solid haul, and it should be easily enough to max out my huntsman's bow, which is the main goal. That's the main thing I want to do right now before I progress further. And as I mentioned, I wanted to progress into the mountains, and this is the last thing I needed to feel comfortable going into the mountains, because this would mean my weaponry is on par to what it would have been had I fully completed the swamp biome. Here, as day 50 dawns, I at this time was thinking, okay, I'm pretty close to having a max swamp weapon. I have my frost resistance meads, I can dip into the mountains, I have a mountain nearby. I mean, I'm thinking I'm within a couple hours or so of killing Bone Mass. Spoiler alert, this was not the case. But in the meantime, I had some house chores to do. I had to farm, smelt the iron, finally cook the surfeit meat, because you need to have iron chains in order to cook it. So I was able to get that cooked to get the new best food, my new best food. I also want to point out, this is why I allow myself to sleep just at my starter base, because it keeps the deaths just as punishing. I mean, other than a 1-minute jog from spawn altar to my base, but it allows me to speed up time like this, so I have more action in the videos, and it's not just, you know, waiting for stuff to smelt. So that is the logic behind allowing myself to sleep just at the starter base, because it keeps the deaths just as punishing, as I said. And as such, after this influx of iron, I was able to finally max out my huntsman's bow. So now I had my tier 4 weapon, and I wanted to test it out. So I go into the Black Forest because I'm excited to see how much damage it does, and a bear kind of jumps behind me, so I'm like, okay, good, I can try it on a bear. Yeah, as you can see, it does nothing. Even a max swamp weaponry with poison arrows, it barely does any damage. And in hardcore, you doing 30% less damage to enemies is really noticeable on the higher health enemies, like a bear, which even in normal is generally pretty tanky. And in fact, this was a 4-minute fight for me to kill this bear with a max swamp tier weapon, which is kind of ridiculous. And since the Call to Arms update, it has, like, the introduction of bears in the Black Forest has made the early game just a completely different beast, and so much more threatening than it was before. After I had my fun testing out the new tier 4 bow, I decided to take my first trip to the mountains, because the thing I was waiting on to go to the mountains originally was this mountain tier weapon. So I got my things prepared, and I crossed the sea to the nearby mountain that was just across the pond. And my goals for this trip was just to get obsidian so I could upgrade my workbench, try and find a silver node, not necessarily mine it, and then get onion seeds so that I could start the new mountain tier food. So going into the mountains, I used the frost resistance mead and then a Ratosk mead, and then also popped the Eikthyr perk, which is a really underrated combo, and I think I'll actually keep this even after I get the Bone Mass perk, because it kind of allows you to infinitely run and outrun things. So I was using this to explore, and I was actually able to, during this exploration, kill my first Drake, which the amount of damage I was doing to the Drake made me think that this might be not a dumb idea, because I felt like it was on par with what I would be doing anyway, and as long as I just was careful about not getting hit by wolves, I thought I'd be okay. And I did actually find the onion seeds and obsidian, so I got 2 of the things I wanted pretty much right off the bat. And so I was just spending the rest of my frost resistance mead and Ratosk mead using the Stagbreaker method of hitting the ground looking for 2 hards to try and find a silver node. And unfortunately I didn't find anything before I got too nervous and, you know, eventually ran out of the mountain before my potions left. But I did actually go into the mountains successfully and not die. And I managed to kill a couple wolves and get some new resources, and then my main objective of getting obsidian so I could upgrade my workbench was a success. So I planted the onion seeds when I got back to base and upgraded my workbench, which now allowed me to upgrade my troll hide to tier 4, so that I would have the maximum tier armor I could going into the mountains. And if you mention the root harness set, technically that is higher tier, but it has actually a lower armor value than the max troll hide. And because I'm playing in hardcore, I'd actually need as much armor as I can get, and because I can't make the higher tier like metal armors, and I have to settle for these intermittent armors, the best one I can get up until the mountains is the troll hide. So getting this tier 4 is a good boon for future explorations. So after I'd fully upgraded my troll hide set, I felt more confident going into the mountains for my second attempt, trying to find silver and, you know, any more obsidian and frost glands from killing drakes so that I could make frost arrows for bone mass. And this time, after I entered the mountain, there was a wolf that kind of surprised me, and for some reason I thought it would be a good idea to try and fight this wolf with my bow instead of just immediately running away. And the wolf got up and hit me. And did not one-shot me. I actually survived, but the fall damage from being knocked back from the wolf off a boulder did kill me, which is kind of an embarrassing way to die. And this did cause me to get off for the night, but the next morning when I got on, I just quickly made a raft and sailed across with nothing on my body except the frost resistance mead and Ratosk to get my body back, which thankfully I'm not lost at this point because, again, this is just right across from my base. I can see the mountain when I look across the water of my base. I can see the mountain that I'm on, so it's very easy not to get lost, which is nice. And then I saw that my body was being puppy guarded, not to make a play on words, but the wolf that killed me was just staying near my body, and I didn't bring any weapons. So I didn't really know what to do here, and for some reason I thought, yeah, I can just run in and outrun the wolf and get my body. Yeah, that didn't work. So I learned my lesson the second time I went to go back, and I actually brought a fine wood bow because I had extras from my time dying in the swamp over and over. And unfortunately I didn't have frost resistance meats because I used it for my unarmed trip, and that caused me to have to run into the mountain biome without frost resistance. And that didn't end up being a problem, thankfully, but it was a lack of planning on my part. And then I found the wolf that was guarding my body. I led him into the Black Forest, got on top of a rock, and then killed him where I was safe. And then I ran back into the mountains where I was able to get my body back successfully. And then I booked it back to the Black Forest, got back to my base, and then just kind of licked my wounds, because that was a just embarrassing series of deaths. But I knew I needed to go back into the mountains to get more frost glands and more things to make frost arrows, because that was my plan to kill bone mass, was get frost arrows because he's weak to frost, and I could use my, higher tier bow and level up my bow skill that way. Further, I knew I needed more resources, I needed more frost glands to make frost arrows for bone mass. So I went into the mountain, and then just about a minute after entering, I heard a wolf snarl. And I saw one jump around the corner, so I just sprinted back into the Black Forest. Unfortunately, I was not fast enough, and it ended up getting me killed. So I think the lesson from this is to not fight the wolves at close range, just to get away to safety, because they are super fast, and just in the time it takes me to draw my bow, I ended up dead. So, just like the last 2 deaths, I made another raft that travels about 2 miles an hour on the water, and got back to the mountain. This time my body was in the Black Forest, so it was significantly safer to grab. So I get my body back, and then go back to the base, just think about what I've done basically, and then I know I needed to go to the mountains, like that's the whole point of this, and it's gonna take deaths, but I need to get the higher tier arrows in order to kill bowmass, so I needed more drakes and I needed more obsidian, and I still wanted to find silver. So I went back to the mountain and I got the obsidian that I wanted for the arrows, and then got scared and left. So that's really all that I accomplished on this trip, but I did survive. I made it back to base, and then I was able to make the frost arrows that I was talking about for bone mass. And then during this time I was also harvesting my crops, so now I had a crop of onions that I had harvested and replanted, and then turnips, which allowed me to upgrade my cauldron. So I had higher tier food, I had the poison resistance mead, I had healing mead, tasty mead, Ratosk mead, and then a bunch of frozen arrows for bone mass. So I felt like I was ready to take him on, so I went to go look for him at this point. And I spent almost an hour of my life just searching for him for this playthrough, and then eventually it became nighttime and I had to sit off the side of a black forest and wait for it to become day, because as I mentioned, you cannot see anything. So this is what I got off for the day. And then the next day when I got on, I was, you know, still in this still in the ocean looking for bone mass, land in my original swamp where I found the vestige for the first time, and then recheck the vestige now that I know how they work. And then I actually found out I was heading in the complete opposite direction. So now that I had this new correct direction, I headed in that, I headed towards that direction. This entire time, I am exploring every swamp that is ample size that I think could host bone mass that's in the general direction. And I'm just going from swamp to swamp looking for bone mass, and every time it turns nighttime, if I can't see anything, I'm parking off the edge of a coast hoping that my boat doesn't capsize, which yes, that is a thing. And ask me why I didn't make the longship sooner. I couldn't tell you, because A, it's faster, but B, it has a lower chance of getting killed by serpents and capsizing. So I should have made this significantly sooner, and I don't know why I didn't. I'm just traveling around in a carve and wasting a ton of time essentially. But after a long time of hitting all the swamps, my food was running low, and if I ran out of food, I was gonna die. I mean, 25 HP and 50 stamina is not enough to sustain yourself in the swamp. So I decided I guess I had to head back home and just farm for more food, and thankfully during this time there's a couple serpent attacks, so I was able to get more serpent meat. And then I kind of wanted to take a break from exploring because it was getting a little monotonous. So I took this time to build my base up a little more and try and get a new comfort area. Because as I talked about, I wanted to have kind of a Viking village. So I made the harbor, I made the entrance, so now I wanted to work on the comfort area, or my house, like kind of a cabin of sorts. And then this would also kind of house the cooking area. And then I also during this time made the longship, finally, with some of the ancient bark that I had farmed from previous swamps and some more iron. So I had the upgraded ship, so now the next time I went to look for bone mass, I'd actually have the higher tier ship that went faster and was more sturdy. And then I got bored of building, but I knew I wasn't ready to head to bone mass quite yet because I needed to wait for my crops to grow. So I headed to the mountains in this time, and I used the stag breaker, and I actually found silver. So when you're mining silver, the most efficient way to mine it is to just mine around the silver node, and then once it's completely suspended, if you break it, like one section of it, the whole thing will crumble. So when you're doing this and you're mining around it and you're underneath it, enemies don't really come into the hole unless they get pushed in. So I was actually quite safe in here, and I managed to spend the night kind of mining the silver node. And I knew I wouldn't be able to take the whole thing, so I just took one of the 3 fingers and broke it, put it into a chest, and then took a couple loads back to the base so I could start the silver age. And then right now I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with the silver, so I kind of just put it into a cauldron upgrade and then put the rest in a chest for later. And then I did general base chores to finish this play session. Starting off my next play session, I wanted to go exploring the mountain further just to prepare for bone mass a little more and wait for some of my crops and stuff to finish growing so that I would be completely prepared for the fight. So on my way down one of the last trips, I saw a frost cave, and so I decided to go exploring that because I wanted to get the Fenris armor set, as that would be the next highest armor stat I could get without using the metal armors. And while I was exploring this, one thing I noticed that was kind of shocking to me is those bats that you normally can just ignore did 8 damage a hit to me, which is actually noticeable and is kind of crazy. And that's just another thing playing with hardcore, is you really can't ignore anything at all. But this was just a quick expedition into the mountain. I explored the frost cave, I got a little more obsidian, a little more freeze glands to make frost arrows, and then I left. When I got back to base, I managed to kill a troll on my way back, so I was able to finally upgrade my cloak, which was the final armor piece I needed to max out my troll hide. And so almost 70 days into this run, I finally had max troll hide armor, which is just insane that it took me that long. But right now, again, I was just kind of stalling, waiting for things to grow and potions to be done brewing to fight bone mass, so I spent some more time working on the base, and I think it was coming along quite well. I'm not particularly good at building, and in fact this is the first world where I've actually put effort into making things look better and kind of adding layers to the base and, you know, thinking about more than just functionality. But I have a lot to learn, and I'd take any advice you have on building in the comments. It'd be much appreciated, but I think it looks okay. And after I'd spent some time working the base and everything I needed was ready, I had spent some time packing my longship, which now had extra storage for the journey to find bone mass, and I was in the mentality of I'm either going to come back dead or with bone mass dead. There is no in between. So I made excess of food, excess arrows, everything I could think I need. I brought my forge to repair my bow because I thought I'd be gone so long I'd need to repair it, and you need a forge which takes metal to do. So I brought that with me even, and then I set sail. So I'd already explored a lot. In fact, I'd already explored 6 hours at this point, but I was exploring the first couple hours in the wrong direction, and when I was going in the right direction, I didn't go that far because I hit a plains and a mistlands, and I was like, this is too far out, surely bone mass isn't here. But this time I was thinking, okay, if I just keep going a little further, maybe I'll find him. And literally just around the corner of where I stopped the last trip, I have found Haldor, the trader. So I never thought I would find this dude in hardcore with no map and no portals, because it is such a rare find. There's only one in the world, and if I had accidentally come across him somewhere else and he spawned in and I didn't catch him at that time, there'd pretty much be no way for me to see him, and he would never spawn in again. But thankfully I did find him, and I brought gold with me in the off chance that I did find him, so I was able to buy Mayhor, and now I had 450 carry weight, which was amazing, and I know where he was at. So this made me hopeful and put me in a good mood, and about 5 minutes later I landed in a massive swamp, and it was in the same direction as bone mass, so I was thinking, no way I just found trader into bone mass back to back. But I go and explore a crypt right off the coastline, and I found a vestige that pointed me to the center of the swamp, and lo and behold, after I followed that direction, I found the bone mass skull. At this point I was ecstatic. I mean, I think I spent probably 8 hours of my life searching for this guy, and I finally found him. And I'm hoping that Motor and the Yagluth are going to be much easier to find, because Yagluth's altar is very noticeable, and Motor is just, it's a big mountain in the general direction. I mean, surely that's not that hard. But after I found this dude, I began prep work in that I cleared out a crypt, set my rested buff there, kind of made a safe haven around the entrance of the crypt where I could repair my tools, and I got my rested buff. And then, of course, as I was ready to fight the boss, it became nighttime, and I'm not fighting the boss at night, so I stayed in the crypt and I started mining out the crypt just to kind of kill the time. And I ended up with over 134 iron just working overnight, and the crypt wasn't even completely cleared out by the time that it became day. So as dawn set, I went to the altar and I started the fight. First thing I note during this fight after I make the sacrifice, frost arrows do an insane amount of damage. For like what I was used to when I fought him the first time I ever fought him with a bow. If you shoot him with a normal arrow, it does nothing. So I was very happy that the prep work I had done had actually worked, and going into the mountains in my mind was worth it. I also, during the beginning of this fight, I popped the tasty mead because I didn't know what it did. I thought that it just gave you stamina regeneration for 10 minutes like everything else, but it's just a quick stamina burst for 10 seconds, so you should pop it when you have 0 stamina and you need to get back up to full. But I didn't know that going forward. And right as the fight started, I actually took a melee hit from Bone Mass, and when I was looking up how much damage he did in very hard mode, I was unsure if I would survive even with max troll hide. But obviously I did, which is great, and I had to pop my healing mead, which at this point I only had 2 of, so I was really wishing I had packed more because this was making me a little nervous. And not even 2 minutes later, I took another melee hit, so I didn't want to use my final healing mead because it's like, what if I need to use this later? So I just played super carefully, kited him around, made sure to keep plenty of distance, and obviously after taking 2 melee hits within the first 5 minutes of the fight, I am really questioning if this is gonna work out and if I'm gonna be able to beat this dude, because that is a horrible way to start the fight. And then not too long after this, my rested buff ran out, and instead of going to refresh it because I noticed he was following me further into the swamp than I expected, I decided to just tough it out because I did not want him destroying my temporary base. So at this point I kind of just had to get into the flow state of kiting the boss, killing ads, and damaging him when I could. And my bow durability was getting low, and again, I didn't want to kite him back to my temporary base, so I was having to use my mace to kill the ads, which was a significant risk to me and super stupid, but I managed to make it work, and I didn't have my bow break, and thankfully, I managed to kill Bone Mass. Though, of course, it happened to be in the middle of the water where leeches are rampant. Though, thankfully, I was able to get this stuff, go back to my temporary base, and recover. I had done it. I had beaten the 3rd boss. So, now I'm sitting in this crypt. It's the middle of the night, and I have 170 iron I need to bring back to my boat. So, of course, in all my infinite wisdom, I decide I'll just make a quick run in the middle of the night to my boat. It's not that far, drop the iron off and come back just to save myself some time so that I can get headed out in the morning. As I'm running back to my base, I get swarmed by wraiths, which are only a night spawn, and I die. So in my effort to try and save me the 9 minutes that nighttime is, I cost myself hours of work, and this is a place I'm not sure I'll be able to get back to. I really don't know where I'm at, and this is a horrible trend to have for my videos, is kill a boss after tons of build up for it and then die on the way home. And I think there is something to be said about when you're in the flow state of a boss, you're focused up, and then once you relax that a little bit and you relax your judgment, you're significantly more likely to make mistakes. So this is how this video ends, and that's how it happened for the 2nd time in a row, and I hope Motor is a different story. But thank you for watching.